Alrighty, let's get started. We have more than 100 people in the room, so I guess it's a good time. So first off, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on where you're connecting from. My name is Alessio. I'm the founder and CEO of Fooding, and I'm beyond excited to welcome you to this webinar, which will be all about alternative protein. And most and foremost, to actually join us to celebrate the world's entrepreneurial food tech talent today. So I'm going to go through the agenda really quickly. I'm going to be trying to be as quickly as possible to actually leave the floor to our panelists, which is very much the reason why we actually set up this kind of webinars. But very quickly, I'm going to introduce you to what we do at Forward Fooding and what the FoodTech 500 is all about. I'm going to then pass it over to Alex Choisson, Senior Consultant at Forward Fooding, who's going to give you an overview of the alternative protein sector and talk about investment trends. And then the kind of dessert of the session will be actually our session with the panelists, which will be moderated by Michiel van Deursen, which is the founder of Capital V, and we'll introduce you to our panelists, which are top-notch entrepreneurs working on leading companies in the alternative protein space. Then we're going to take your questions, and we'll try to take as many as we can for actually our panelists. So you will get the opportunity to also interact with them. But before I get into that, really quickly about Forward Fooding, we founded the company back in 2015 in the UK with a very simple mission, which is empowering basically all the ecosystem stakeholders of the agri-food tech ecosystem with data, insight, and connections from our global food tech startup network in order to foster innovation that can really redesign our food system, or at least can contribute to creating a brighter future of foods. How do we do it? We primarily provide free services. On the one end, we provide data and insights that actually are taken from our data intelligence platform called the Food Data Navigator, which now maps about 11,000 actually ecosystem actors, including startups, scale-ups, investors, accelerators, incubators all over the world. We then provide scouting and matchmaking services to our corporates and investors clients. And then we basically provide global exposure to leading agri-food tech companies through our innovation hubs in London and Barcelona now, and through our FoodTech 500, which is basically what we're here for today. FoodTech Data Navigator really quickly provides you basically with an overview of the ecosystem. As I mentioned earlier, we've been mapping actually the ecosystem from 2013. And effectively, we're now mapping about 11,000 ecosystem actors, including 5,600 startups and scale-ups, 140 accelerators and incubators, about almost 4,000 investors, including VC, institutionals, and business angels, and about 240 corporate organizations and corporate venture capital. Our network at glance, we work with about 20 clients, corporate clients, and we have done about 35 strategy consulting projects, including projects with 5 Fortune 500 companies. We have mapped, as I mentioned, about 5,600 companies, international companies of the agri-food tech ecosystem, and they're currently in our database. However, we have we're going through actually a process of adding about 4,000 actually more companies on it. We have 15 resident companies between our London and Barcelona hub, and only through the FoodTech 500, we've received about more than actually 3,200 applications over the last 2 years. And these are just some of our partners, supporters, and clients. We literally bundled them up into one slide because we think that they are part of our ecosystem, and we see them as collaborators more than clients or necessarily having a label attached to it. But as I mentioned, we're here to basically celebrate the FoodTech 500, and the FoodTech 500 actually was a project that was initiated over a lunch meeting with our team in London back in 2019, where we were all pondering about who was going to be the next kind of rising star, in the world of agri-food tech, or the one that is going to IPO next. And this was a few days after actually Beyond Meat filed for their IPO. And so with the FoodTech 500, we basically created a very simple mission behind it, which was to shine, the spotlight on the leading innovators across the agri-food tech ecosystem that we're creating actually impactful solution to bettering our food system. And so with this in mind, we decided to basically create this list that ultimately aims to become the Fortune 500, of food tech. But given that, we didn't have a scoring mechanism, to begin with, that was helping us to actually rank the businesses, we actually had to create one. And so in 2019, we leveraged actually our data intelligence platform to basically create the business size score and the digital footprint score, which are both algorithm led, and they provide respectively a proxy of the size of the business in terms of number of headcounts, the number of countries where they operate or they have offices in, and amount of funding that they've actually raised. Whereas the digital footprint is a proxy of the amount of traffic that they're able to generate over their website, or their company website, and how fast they're actually growing over social media. And ultimately, as we wanted to actually take into consideration also the sustainability factor, we developed a new mechanism from scratch with leading experts in sustainability that help us to create a survey around the SDGs that then we asked the companies to basically fill out. But again, we couldn't have done this all by ourselves. So we have created a collaboratory of different stakeholders that have helped us to put this together. First, our media partners that help us to reach all the companies, that we were able to get as to apply to our competition. Our sponsors, including Neom and Rothamsted Enterprises, which have helped us and support us financially to actually make this happen, but also our technical partners, Data Scouts, who has provided the technology to actually create the business size and the digital footprint, as well as University of Turin, and who actually help us to create the sustainability score. And just some key numbers, as I mentioned, we've received about actually 2,052 applications for this year edition. We've covered about 63 countries in terms of application received, and about 52 in terms of 500 companies that we actually have selected. And so far, we had about 370,000 page views from 60,000 visitors from 170 countries. So literally, we're trying to give as much exposure as we can to the companies that actually made it into our list. And we already have actually 450 companies that have applied for next year, which it's a very promising number, given that we haven't even started collecting applications. But one of the most important thing about this year competition is the fact that it actually have confirmed our belief that this ecosystem is thriving so much because it's actually very diverse and very inclusive. So this year we went above and beyond, not only in trying to understand the growth driver of the ecosystem and collecting actually more information from the companies that have made into it. And that actually really led us to understand that, for instance, 25.2% of the companies that have made actually into this year FoodTech 500 are actually women founded, which I think is really great. Is a really great number that shows that compared to other, let's say, tech, is well above the average. But also 16% is 60% of the companies are actually founded by BAM, so Black, Asian, and Minority ethnics, and 3% is by LGBT plus, and 1.2% by founders with disability. And these numbers really struck us because we didn't have this type of data last year, and we think that it helped us to understand again, what is leading this such a big growth, in the market. And then, as I said, really to give as much visibility as we could to the companies that made into this year list, we actually developed 18 vertical reports with exclusive interviews with some of the founders of the companies that we have actually featured, to basically dig deeper into what actually led them, to develop the business, why, for instance, they think tech is central to the development of the next generation of actually products of the agri-food ecosystem. And today we're releasing the alternative protein 1, as well as the cellular agriculture and precision fermentation report, which you will be that will be available on forwardfooding.com/reports. And last but not least, in 2 weeks from now, we will be launching our last free reports, which will be about vertical farming, ag biotech, and precision farming, and will be available as of March the 31st on our report section on our website. So without further ado, let me introduce you to Alex, who's going to take it from here to give you a quick overview about the alternative protein sector.
Super. Thanks, Alessio. So in the past year, conversations in the food space have increasingly focused on alternative proteins, from plant-based meat and dairy alternatives to lab-grown and fermentation. One of the strongest changes generated by the pandemic is that pivot in consumer interest to more sustainable and crisis-resilient alternative proteins. And in turn, this has impacted capital inflow in the sector. So what we can really see from this slide is precisely that. More than 2.4 billion euros were raised in the alternative protein sector in 2020, compared to 1.5 billion in 2019. So this represents a 60% increase year on year. And if we look back to 2018, an 81% CAGR, which is basically the mean annual growth rate. So both figures really exemplify the exponential increase in capital that alternative proteins have experienced recently. If you look at the graph on the right, this really quantifies this further, because you can see that more than 40% of alternative protein funding was raised just in the last year. And this graph also benchmarks alternative protein to food delivery, because this really shows you that alternative protein are clearly catching up with one of the most well-funded food tech sectors. And as of now, alternative proteins are the third most funded food sector in 2020, after midstream tech and e-commerce, grocery and delivery. So if we move on to the next slide, amazing. It's great to have an evolution of overall alternative proteins, but how does each subsector compare? So plant-based startups really lead in terms of absolute amount of fund raised. This is something that we know. What's interesting is that this graph clearly shows investors see the potential for viable and scalable technologies in the cell-based and fermentation spaces. And we can really see that the increase in capital has peaked in the last year. Cell-based startups particularly stand out as having secured over half of the total capital for their category just in 2020. So that's basically a factor of 8.2 increase in capital since 2018. And fermentation startups, although there's been a lower growth in the past year and the really exponential growth in 2018, we can still see that capital still keeps on increasing. So if we move on to the next slide. If we now look at maturity stages, so where are the startups? Again, plant-based startups lead in terms of absolute number of startups at each stage, so from formation to mature stage. What's interesting to note here is that 58% of all plant-based startups are currently in the validation stage. So this really supports the fact that plant-based foods continue to gain traction, continue to attract a lot of interest, which also drives competition in this space. When we move on to the validation stage, but from a cell ag perspective, 78% of these startups are in that stage, which suggests it's the youngest of all three categories. However, it's also interesting to note that sizable raises by Memphis Meats and Moser Meat are inching cultured meat and proteins really closer to the market. Then if we move to the growth stage, while the number of cell-based and fermentation startups are identical, the high percent of total fermentation startups at this stage suggests a somewhat more developed tech for this category as part of overall alternative proteins. And then the final slide. So we've seen the evolution in capital for alternative proteins. Overall, we've seen the breakdown per subcategory or tech or process. Now, if we look on a geographical perspective, it will be no surprise that the US remains the largest market for alternative proteins overall, from plant to cell and fermentation. The market reached about 5 billion in sales a year ago. The second most active region is Europe, where the UK has really the largest market for plant-based food, with an estimated value of 1.1 billion a year ago, closely followed by Germany. And then if we think on a global level, comparable markets would be those of Singapore and Israel, which are food hubs that hold prevalent spaces in the global food tech ecosystem. Regarding fermentation, the Netherlands really stand out with companies such as the Protein Brewery, for example, which produce protein-rich ingredients. And then finally, when we look at cell ag, regulation for plant-based meat is slowly starting to move in the right direction. I think most of you heard Singapore was just granted the world's first approval to lab-grown meat with Each's cultural chicken, and this will also resonate with plant-based meats. So this was an overview. I hope it's helped you put a little bit of context for this talk today. And I'm now going to hand over to Michiel.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot, Alex. And yes, without further ado, let me introduce to Michiel from Capital V, who is going to introduce you to our panelists.
Yes, hello. Thank you so much. That was super interesting. Thank you for having me. I will introduce myself first a little bit and then move over to the more interesting part, which is the companies. I am from Holland, Michiel van Deursen. I'm founder of Capital V, and I'm an investor in the alternative protein space. The first investment was the Vegetarian Butcher, which maybe people know exited to Unilever. We have about 20 companies in the portfolio, all in the alternative protein space. Personally, I started out as an entrepreneur myself. I started a tech company in the internet space, exited 2 companies in that space, and moved on to alternative protein for various reasons. Impact being a very important one. And I'm also based in Barcelona at the moment, like a few people here on the panel. And I also, I would like to hear about companies. So I think let's start with the local one, Mark Coloma of Hura. I have a list of prizes you have won already, and it's a very long list. I think I can fill the hour with it, but you have the Young Innovator Award. Forbes said you're one of the 100 most creative people in business, best entrepreneur of the year, 100 other fortunes of Forbes for your positive impact on the world, etc., etc. Well, I would love to hear from you who you are.
Well, at the end, this list talks about it's a result of the excitement that I think that the category and a future of a protein transition brings to people. So I'm Mark Coloma, co-founder and CEO of Aerofoot, and I'm coming from a background of activism and social entrepreneurship since I was a teenager, until it got a point in my life that I thought that the transformative impact that I wanted to have through technology and through a company could scale faster than consciousness, and that is what brought me to Hura.
Great. Well, it's a great product you have. Cedra, you're in the US. I've seen your pitch, I think last week at Vivolution.com. I was very impressed. I also like the rebel kind of style. I think Mark and you have that in common. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, I'm Sadra Shadell, co-founder and chief creative officer at No Evil Foods. I guess I bring to the company about 15 years experience in food, but not in the way that you'd expect. I worked in restaurants in front of house as servers, as bartenders. I come to it with a entrepreneurial mindset and also a background in activism in my previous work or life in social work and helping provide opportunities for folks with multiple barriers to advancement is what my background is. And I really use food as a way to continue to extend how I impact the world. I'm a vegetarian since birth and a vegan now. And so I have a lot of experience from that angle as well into what the consumer experience over close to 4 decades of the way that the market has evolved for plant-based. And I'm just a big advocate for sustainability and social justice and helping people and animals, and I execute that through everything that we do here at No Evil Foods.
That's so great. All mission-aligned people. Ram, you're in Sweden. Sweden, we know, of course, from Oatly, but
Yeah.
you are the other big company, I think.
Yes, we would like to be the next Oatly.
Tell us about yourself.
Hey, my name is Ram Nair. I'm originally from India, and I came to Sweden for my PhD research. And so I have a technical background, and Mycorrhiza was a spin out from our research work in 2017. And then I changed my researcher hat and put on an entrepreneurial hat, which at that time was completely new to me. I had no idea how to build a business. I still think I have no idea, but I'm trying. And it's more like we thought the fungi and fermentation could change, or could be like one of the best solutions that vegan sector could actually have. And as you already see it in the presentation with Alex, that is where we stand now, with the fermentation being one of the very key part of both Mycorrhiza and also several other companies that in the space trying to position ourselves in the vegan sector. So we are glad to have been one of the forefronters in this space, especially in Scandinavia.
Totally, yeah. And then last but not least, Michelle, everybody is doing some kind of food, alternative protein. You have a very special one, Biomilk. It's incredible, I think, what you're doing. I wonder what your story is.
Yeah, so I'm a food scientist by training. So I spent most of my career in dairy fermentation, commercialization, always focused on cow products, never human before this part in my life. And have always had a deep passion for feeding others, similar to many people on this panel. It sounds like a deep love for food and feeding, and really think that when we look ahead to some of the biggest challenges the world faces, food and the kind of challenges with planetary boundaries that come with trying to feed a growing planet is something that's always really fascinated me. And I got bored with my corporate R&D job and departed to enter a career in social impact and entrepreneurship. And through that was linked up with Layla, our CSO here at Biomilk. We're creating human breast milk outside of the body using human mammary epithelial cell technology. So we are squarely in the cellular agriculture field, although we're probably one of the only cellular agriculture companies that agriculturally, we don't farm women to create breast milk. So we don't really have an alternate out there in the field necessarily, but are utilizing some really fascinating cell technology to be able to think about how we solve infant nutrition, creating higher quality products for parents, combating bovine-based infant formula, which contributes to global climate change, and empowering women and parents to be able to make better choices for themselves, their bodies, and their children.
Incredible, really. I think all of you, I follow this space, obviously, as an investor closely, and all of your companies I see pop up everywhere all the time as front runners of the space. So I'm very happy that you're all on my screen together, and we can talk a bit about your companies. I'd like to go back to Mark. You are in Spain. As I said, I'm in Barcelona, and you cannot walk into a restaurant or a supermarket or talk to somebody who is actually plant-based, and they say the name of your company in a kind of very happy way. What happened? How are you How did you get there?
Well, step by step. At the end, we jumped to make this happen because we believed in this transformation. So in 2017, when people look at this space like a weird space and not like an exciting one, we were there convincing and getting to try the product to a lot of people, and it became really, really big in Barcelona, and right now expanding to the world. At the end, from the beginning, we have had a clear view about it's about creating meat successors and the next step from meat, and doing in a way onboarding people in order to be part of this movement.
Yes, and you're talking about the second generation of plant-based meat. What other generations do we have, and why is it the second generation?
Well, at the end, it comes to this concept of mixed successors. I think that the pioneers that were born in Silicon Valley in the 2009 and 11, Beyond Meat and Impossible, they focused a lot about, okay, how we can replicate the same experience and take the animal out of the equation and have much better environmental impact. But when it comes to the nutrition of the product, at the end, from a saturated fats point of view, we were more or less replicating the same structures, the 80-20 or 90-10, using saturated fats. So at the end, in Hura, we try to have a transformative look at it, inspired by the pioneers, but we think that the category has to achieve three things: creating products that people want to eat every day, so we achieve it as an industry, but also that can eat every day and can afford every day. And right now in Hura, we are in the forefront of the second generation, where we hacked lipid structure. We were able to make olive oil extra virgin, the healthiest fat into the world, to behave like a saturated fat, to achieve juiciness just with 1 gram of saturated fat in a burger. So right now people could eat burgers every day, and the next step is that they can afford it every day.
That's great. I saw the advertising. It's or the press release. It's the most healthy burger in the world, right? That's amazing.
Yes.
So you are now not only in Spain, but also going to other supermarket chains in Italy, UK, France, Latin America. How difficult was it for you to get a food in the retail section? And what are the main challenges you have when it comes to international expansion?
And about we were talking about, this is the most important thing: how to create better burgers, and not just plant-based burgers, because at the end it's about how we change the system of how we eat food, and this is what we are looking for. And linking it to your question, at the end we face two different challenges: more mature markets, even though that the category is emergent, the difference between the size of market in Spain or the UK, it's 16 times. So there is a huge difference. So in more mature markets, we have to explain really well the value proposition of our product and this second generation approach. But this year, we will be also in Poland, in Mexico, in Italy, places where Portugal, where the category is emerging, and there we have to explain the vision of the opportunity of the market and why it's important that we make steps there. So at the end, or I think that our recipe, it's creating a consumer-centric company where we create the best possible products and a communication that onboards consumers on being part of this change and pushing it together.
That's interesting. You say Spain and Portugal and a lot of markets you are in, they are very traditional. They have traditional cuisine, heavy on meat. How do you convince consumers to adopt your product in these markets?
Well, at the end, I think that it's a great question that goes to the core of our value proposition. At the end, what we are doing is trying to how to renovate our traditions and make possible that each cuisine and each culture can happen with plant-based meat. A great tech entrepreneur said, computers like bicycles for the mind. And I think that this is the case as well with plant-based meat. When we are giving freedom and empowerment to chefs to replicate the recipes that they want, but with a positive impact. So at the end, I think that, well, Spain is the second biggest meat market biggest meat consumption in the whole Europe. Starting here with our Mediterranean approach, help us to put the culinary focus in the center and create an excellent product that could travel and adapt well to the different cuisines.
Right. Well, I think it works. It's amazing. I would like to continue to know Evil Foods. You also have a very special product. Tell us about it. What is so special about No Evil Foods?
You know, I think what's special, it's always funny to me to be part of, included in food tech, because I think the one of the massive ways that we approach food is from a place of simplicity and a culinary driven approach, and not so much a food tech approach. And it's easy to get hung up on that, but it's also, I think, important to remember that there's food science in everything. You know, your basic baking soda and vinegar has a chemical reaction. That's food science at a way that a preschooler can understand. So there's always food science integrated in everything that you do. But I think what No Evil Foods does really well, and what's special about the brand that we've built and the products that we create, is we meet at this intersection of clean label, recognizable ingredients, you know, things like kidney beans and chickpeas, whole foods, pantry shelf kind of inspired inputs. And we're able to build those flavors and layer those flavors in a way that meets technology to then output a meat experience. And so it's not so much the ingredients that we're using, or, you know, a bunch of scientists in a lab, but it's that personal connection, it's that personal touch. And I think when you think about technology, your mind already jumps a few steps removed to the human. And I think one of the things that makes No Evil Foods really important is actually the people behind it. You know, you can have the most technologically evolved company that you can think of, but if you don't have the right people and the right heart behind the product that you're creating, the way that you communicate your brand out to the audience, what your brand really stands for, then you're missing a piece of the puzzle. And I think that human connection is one of the very most special things about what we do. And then it's that uncompromising, we do not yield to a lot of things that other companies yield to. We are very uncompromising in our standards for ingredient inclusions and how we set the bar, what the guardrails are for what's okay and what's not okay. I'm sure my R&D department loves how much I push back on that, because they come to me all the time and ask me, hey, is guar gum okay? And for us, that's a no-go. You know, we don't use fillers, we don't use binders, we don't use methyl cellulose, or things that people don't understand. And instead of creating a barrier, we think that creates opportunities for innovation and creativity that other companies miss. And so that's, you know, what's special about us is really the basic approach that we take to innovation.
That's great. Good product and a great team as well. And of course, when I started investing in this space, I think 6 years ago, plant-based and vegan was not really known out there. You see consumers adopting plant-based meat more and more. In the last 2 years, it's gone crazy. What do you think is key to drive the consumer mass adoption of this space?
I think, you know, mass adoption comes with some of the things that Mark was touching on. It comes from affordability, it comes from access, it comes from being able to draw connections to our cultural heritage and see ourselves in plant-based products and in the natural products industry. And I think, you know, when it comes to vegan and plant-based, as companies and as marketing, it's a very white space, and not so much in terms of white space in terms of innovation, but white in terms of ethnicity, in terms of culture. And I don't think that that's reflective of the communities that are actually seeking to engage with plant-based products. And I think that's a big job that all plant-based brands need to pay attention to. And that includes how we hire, you know, what our leadership teams look like, how are we innovating our products? What flavor profiles are we creating? Are we innovating only for a certain type of person, or are we innovating for all sorts of different cultural relationships that we have with food and different cultural heritage? And I think that's partially the key to mass adoption, is really mass appeal and making sure that we're not being narrowly focused or narrow-minded about how we create our products, how we create our brands.
I think that's, yeah, I completely agree. About your brand, one of the amazing things is that you were the first plant-based meat brand in the world, I believe, that went plastic negative.
Yes.
Can you tell us about that? That's super interesting.
Yeah, we're really, really proud of this. Sustainability for us has always been a big part of why we do what we do. And of course, you know, being a plant-based product, we're kind of inherently already more, you know, sustainable than the alternative. I think one of the things that No Evil Foods prioritizes is not just a mindset of we're sustainable because of the products that we create, but we have to look at not just the ingredients that we use, but the packaging that we use and the life cycle of the packaging as well. And so last year we became the first plastic negative certified plant-based meat brand through a partnership with Repurpose Global, which is an organization that helps fund the recovery and recycling of 2 times as much plastic as is created through our packaging. You know, our mission statement includes the health of people as well as the health of the planet. But when we think about the health of people, our perspective is that we're not only, or we shouldn't only consider that from an ingredient standpoint, you know, by creating products that are nutrient dense or, you know, contribute to lower risks of health-related illnesses, diabetes, heart disease, things like that. We should also be thinking of health in terms of who has access to healthy food and who doesn't, and how our packaging impacts the health, not only of the environment in terms of air, water, and land pollution, but also who is impacted by those choices. And the answer to that is that it's typically, you know, low-income communities of color that are disproportionately impacted by the effects of plastic. Countries in Southeast and South Asia are the world's dumping ground for plastic. The work that we're able to do through Repurpose Global is just a really, you know, it's a tiny piece of that. It helps us provide better jobs because part of their model as well is to provide sustainable employment opportunities for marginalized communities in India and Southeast Asia. And, you know, so it helps provide better jobs. It creates new resource streams, a stronger circular economy. All of those things are positive steps, but we certainly don't want to ignore, you know, the environmental or health cost of plastic pollution or consumption either. It's not a perfect solution, but I think that, you know, it's a step in the right direction.
Yeah, it's perfect. I think it's so needed. You're already changing or working very hard on changing how people eat, but you're also making it plastic negative. I was wondering, how do you put that, how do you bake that into your company's mission? And do you already see an impact this plastic negative choice has on your operations? Yeah,
I mean, for us, that mission purpose has been part of who we are as a company from the beginning. We're kind of, I'm sure our team has heard it 100 times, but my co-founder, Mike, and I like to say that we didn't get into this to sell something. We got into this to do something. And so that mission and purpose part has always been incorporated into our business strategy from the beginning. And so I think when you do that, when you lead from purpose from the beginning, it's not so much a question of, you know, where do we find the money? How do we build this program in? We already had that budget set aside, and we had to figure out what is the smartest way for us to utilize this. What is the right partnership that's not just transactional, but you know, creates long-term partnership for lasting change, and always looking at it through that lens of, you know, not just the quick thing to get a little bit of a blip in our marketing, but really what can we do that's actually going to matter, and looking at it from that perspective first and foremost. And we believe that by making those choices, the rest will follow. And so having that budget isn't, you know, a detriment to our company. It isn't a detriment to our growth. That is what is going to enable our growth and our success as a business.
Perfect. Very inspiring. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm going to Sweden now. Mike Arena. Can you tell us about the company?
Yes, I mean, as I said in my introduction, it's basically a spin out from our research work that we did in my PhD period. So what we basically do is like we just grow fungi in fermentation tanks and use that as more like an ingredient for all the plant-based companies that is out there. I mean, if you see like the basic ingredient list, it's most protein source come from peas or soy, or fava beans or lupin. What we are now proposing is actually like an alternative to all the plant-based protein, and that is basically our fungal protein that we branded as Promik. So Promik, the advantage that we have is like it exactly behaves like a texturized TBP. So it's more like you can directly use it in the products that we make. I mean, for example, like with Mark, we had been talking like those kind of products that could be integrated into like in the value proposition that they are making, or companies like Hura is making, like highly sustainable ingredient grown without having any impact or less impact on the environment, because we don't need much of land or water to just grow the fungi. It's more of like a fermentation based process. So that is where we are heading towards, being more of an ingredient and empowering other vegan companies, so that we could be like in the back end supporting all the vegan companies that are out there venturing out for more ingredient applications.
Great. And you raised 1.2 million euros last year to build a new industrial production plant in Sweden, and it's already open, I believe.
Yeah, that's more of our.
Tell us about how it's made. What does the factory look like?
Well, we sometimes say that it's actually a bit more a high-end version of a brewery, so to say. I mean, it's technically we can say like it's kind of a brewery that is more advanced in both the processing and also like in the technology wise what we use kind of process. And it's very similar to a brewing tank, for instance. What we have built now is actually a pilot facility, and now we have like close to like 10 tons production now. We are expanding it soon to like 30 tons, which is basically nothing for a large food company perspective. I mean, they might need like thousands of tons. So we are building our large scale production plant, or kind of a demo scale production plant, that is already in the pipeline. We are setting it up. It should be up and running by end of 2021 or beginning of 2022. And with that, we will probably be able to like supply very large quantities to like selected companies that want to roll out into like commercial production scale. We have closing now a funding round for that to finish or to start off the whole production plant process. Technically speaking, our process is like we have like a fermentation tank. We have certain type of ingredients that we use for growing the fungi. It's basically like sugar based, and the process is very simple. It takes like 24 to 48 hours to just grow the fungus to the size or the quality that we need, and then we separate that out with like simple downstream process. And that's where we actually bring in a lot of innovation, like how we process that to become more exactly like a chicken kind of an approach texture, or a mince kind of texture. So we basically work a lot around that part, like how vegan companies would like to have it without going into like high-end processing. That's also one thing that we are proud of, because we want to like reduce an amount of processing that goes into all these vegan companies. I think Sadra made a very nice point that there is a lot of different ingredients that is going into this all vegan food products, which people are not even aware of. That is where we want to come in, like to reduce the number of ingredients, so to say.
Yeah, that's great. There's really a shift going on to cleaner labels, less ingredients per product. People are actually reading the labels of their products, so that's great. What you're doing is not, you say it's similar to beer, but it's also, I think, newer and better. It's a precision fermentation, and this sector is growing really rapidly. And I think companies are developing different types of bioreactors to scale production. Do you think there's a bottleneck to this technology? And how do you think the whole protein fermentation sector will evolve in the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, I would say like the main bottleneck in that sense would be like the scalability of the whole process. Like as you already mentioned, like even if we say that it's similar to like a brewing, it has its own specialized reactors, like fermenters that we design, equipment that goes around with it. Like a lot of technological advancement is around it. In that perspective, we basically have a challenge of like scaling it a bit high and capex driven process. So we need very much of like heavy investments when if we need to scale from, let's say, from 10 tons to like 3,000 tons, but now we are scaling. It requires like 10x more investment that we need, or even more. So in that perspective, that is one most important bottleneck that we will find, or we are actually facing it as well. And also like coming to the cost part, like how efficiently we can run the fermentation without having like high usage of raw materials, so to say, like, or finding like cheaper raw materials to run the whole fermentation process. That could be like a bottlenecks for all the precision fermentation companies, especially like cell-based companies and all. I mean, luckily in our case, we also could bring in like a circular economy approach into the whole fermentation process, where we can use like resources that otherwise could not be used in the food industry. For example, like they have side streams that could contain sugar-based liquid, and that could be useful for like growing the fungus in a larger scale. So then we could cut down on the economics part and bring like more of a kind of a circular approach for enabling both food companies and also like getting into a new product segment for them. I mean, we are testing that now in with different collaborations that we have in Sweden with both large and small companies, and we find that that could be a way forward when we really scale much commercialized approach. So it's already on the pipeline.
Perfect. It's so exciting, this fungi, what's happening in that space at the moment. Really great. I don't think, Michelle, Biomilk, you work with fungi, but I would love to know more about Biomilk and what it is and what it does.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we're using human cell culture. So we're using human cells, human mammary epithelial cells, which are what in the body lines the mammary gland. They're a cell type that produces 2,500 plus components of breast milk in a human's body. And we just happen to be giving them a safe, warm place and plenty of nutrients to produce milk outside of the body. So now this cell type, one of the really amazing things about it is evolutionarily, it really does a majority of the heavy lifting as it pertains to creating milk, both in humans, but also in all mammalian species. And so that means for us, we're able to really be good shepherds, where we're giving the cells the ability to create a tight layer where they're keeping separation between in the body, it would be blood, but outside of the body here, media and milk that they secrete. We sounds like similar to many of the panelists, in a lot of ways, our technology really is foundational against naturally what's already occurring, and really leveraging the ability of this cell type to produce complexity of milk in a way that allows us to capture it and bring it to market safely for consumers.
Great. And how is it? Can you talk us through how it's made, the product?
Yeah. So our system for this particular cell type, they know their tops from their bottoms. That's how I like to describe it. And they zipper in tight, creating this really tight layer, which enables them to unidirectionally pull in nutrients and push milk out the other side, where we're then able to collect it. And so the system looks more like, less like fermentation, which is where my background is in, and much more like biologics or even vaccine production in many ways. So you're actually utilizing the cells themselves as the processing equipment rather than the system itself. And that means the end product is produced in a manner where it's sterile and is whole form liquid milk. So when we think about typical dairy industry, for instance, when you're bringing in raw milk, you're pasteurizing, you're concentrating, you're trying to blend the milk fat globules so you're not getting separation. For us, we don't have to do any of that. The milk is produced in its whole form sterilely, and we really just have to maintain that sterility in that process to be able to have a final product. Now, that being said, unlike pretty much everyone else on this panel, our technology is a lot more nascent, much earlier. And so we are, we're still in a very much R&D optimization phase. working at pretty small quantities and heading towards creating more quantity to get into regulatory approval, but definitely can't be found on shelves throughout Europe or shelves throughout the United States or North America. We're still much earlier, and I would say kind of on the leading edge of more deep tech, food tech, although I take issue similar to Sadra of kind of what is food tech in essence of itself when we talk about the sector more broadly.
Yeah, it's very broad. I was wondering, you said it will not be in shelves anytime soon. Will it ever be in shelves? Because also the product is very tailor-made, right?
Yeah, so we've gotten a lot of press and attention for the fact that we can make custom breast milk, which we can. The gender of the cells even doesn't matter. You can make male or female breast milk, which for our LGBTQI community is really empowering. But for us, it's not a scalable solution long term. It's a great way to talk about socializing the product, to really match scale up to consumer acceptance, and to really handle kind of bespokely for those that this is truly a medical need, where breast milk low production or lack thereof of production is a huge problem, versus we look longer term to a launch where we're able to maintain and manage our own cell lines, our own little powerhouses outside of the body, and producing a more general product that's able to be sold direct to consumer online or on shelves, but is not necessarily a customized product in the way that we talk about and is our initial market foray.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's a bit more scalable this way. I understand. Yeah, and I am reading now with Biomilk, you want to harness the capacity to drive environmental and social change to creative food solutions with a consumer first design. So when you are talking about product development, what kind of challenges have you faced and how have you addressed them?
Yeah, I mean, so for us, right, the technological challenges look very different than when I worked in yogurt fermentation. We're talking about a sector and industry that right now we're using, mostly reagent scale and size inputs. So when you talk about kind of the nutrients that are required to support cellular growth, a lot of them have been created to support research only, or maybe drug production. So they're incredibly expensive and very uncommon to come across. It's not like that you can use just soybeans to feed your cells necessarily. It requires a pretty specific blend of nutrients and minerals and hormones. And so that continues to definitely be a problem, not just for us, but for the entire cellular agriculture area as we think about scaling. And then also thinking about, I mentioned briefly consumer acceptance, but I think one of the things we're really proud of is, we get to talk about nutritional change being a human leverage point for differential outcomes in people. And we get to talk about women's empowerment and encouraging women, families, parents to be able to think about how they feed their children in a way that fits their lifestyle. And then we get to talk about sustainability. So we don't have to focus on, you're killing the planet by using bovine-based infant formula, be better. Instead, we can say, hey, there's so many personal benefits that make sense for why this product should exist. And we happen to do less harm to the environment than cows and bovine-based infant formula does today. And I really think about when you look at kind of the broader food tech sector, some of the questions that have been popping up around, does it still have to taste good? Does it still have to be in cool packaging? Does it still have to show up on shelves where consumers are expecting? And the answer is, yeah, like we're selfish. Consumers are kind of selfish. They want something that tastes excellent. They want it to be in beautiful packaging, the way No Evil and Hura's foods are. They want it to be accessible in the places they shop commonly. They don't want it to be out of their way. And when you have that many hurdles to overcome, sustainability, circular recycling, all of these different kinds of business costs that add up become harder and harder with a mission-aligned company to keep up with and to really implement. And so for us, we're really darn lucky in that we get to talk mainly about all of the things we get to do for the consumer, and they happen to be doing good by making a decision of moving with us rather than moving with other product alternates in the category. And I really think as we look ahead to the 3.0 of food tech or 4.0 of food tech, it's going to take all of us to be more thoughtful, more creative, scrappier on how we actually provide that personal benefit for a consumer and make it a no-brainer to pick up our products versus the traditionally agriculturally created ones.
Great. I love this product. It speaks to the imagination very much. It's very early stage. That said, you raised a lot of, you also had a successful raise last year, I believe. it was for optimizing production and expanding your team. So I was wondering, where do you stand now and what is next?
Yeah. So we like to joke, we celebrated our 1-year birthday. We're now not an infant anymore. We're headed into the toddler years. And so we went from being, a 2-person lady business that was super focused on how do we create change in the world to now we're a team of 15. We have a lab space here in Research Triangle Park, North Carolina, and are working on moving past optimization into scale up, which as a scientist who did a lot of process engineering work in my past, I can tell you was a challenge. So for us, on the horizon is continuing to build out the capacity that we require to begin regulatory testing, the capacity that we require to be able to have people sample product and understand what it looks like, what it tastes like, how you use it. And then moving into being able to build the appropriate infrastructure to actually get this product distributed. So unlike everyone else here, who I'm sure is already financially stable and making money, at least hopefully making money, we're not. We're very, very early. We are purely R&D. And from us, we have another 3 to 5 years probably of you seeing all of our faces saying, it's coming, until it'll officially be in market.
Brilliant. Can't wait. Time's flying. It's 7 now. I'm here in Barcelona. And I want to have a few open questions to all of you before we do the Q&A from the audience. So I think you will be unmuted now, or else unmute yourself, it's possible. And I would like to ask you all, what is the one piece of practical advice you would give yourself? You would give to your younger self? If you can travel back in time and you saw previous you, what would you say? Jump in. Anyone?
Well, in my case, I think that I got to take risks starting a startup, but I will say to myself, be bolder, jump faster and jump higher and follow my gut more.
That's a great one.
That is a good one. I love to follow your gut, and I think that one's a one that I live by as well. Sometimes to my own detriment, but usually the gut steers me right. I would say follow your passion, not a paycheck. I think that advice leads people to where they're meant to be and where they are most impactful. Rather than getting distracted by what you should be doing or what you have a degree in, and trying to make the most out of this path or this box that you built for yourself, but instead lead with your own heart, trust your gut, follow the purpose and your passion, and the rest will kind of catch up with you.
Yeah, I would similarly say so. Learning to let go is really hard as a founder of something. It's your baby, no pun intended on my side, but for everybody, it's their babies. And figuring out where to learn to trust that others are going to do things differently than you, but they understand your mission and your drive and your passion, and they're there to fight side by side with you. Not beating yourself up over the small stuff. You're going to make an inordinate amount of mistakes and you're going to regret some of them, and some of them you wouldn't have been able to do anything differently. And so I think really encouraging not only just to be gentle on yourself, but also learn to let go of I know what I know and I'm going to do what I do. And you kind of have to be resilient and make it work in whatever way it is. And I think for pretty type A founders, that's really hard. Even founders who don't consider themselves type A are usually pretty driven, and we're often our harshest critics. So learning to let go and be okay with that good is good enough and move on is pretty important.
Exactly. I mean, in my case also, like when I spun out my career, I had no background in doing a business or entrepreneurship. In that sense, I was a pure researcher. So only thing that I had at that period was like the strong, feeling that this could be something big, and also like believing in what we have been doing so far for a long time. So staying that focus is something I believe very important for an entrepreneur to sort of say, like there'll be 100 people saying that, this will not work. But that is something that to just close your ears and just, go forward, just following the gut. And also like having people who really believe in you even if they are, even if they don't know what also like how to do it, just take them along, and you will figure out during the way. And that's what we did it. I mean, the founding team that we had, none of us have any experience in building a business, so we just learn by doing, and also like that passion will come on board anyhow, and then you will figure out like how to get money and find investors, and all those things will fall in place. And luckily for us, it's so far it's working, and I think it's going to be working like that as well.
Perfect. Great question. Great advice for your younger selves. Now, a lot of people in the audience now that are also FoodTech founders. And I would like to know, what has been the biggest challenge, the biggest learning for you personally as a FoodTech founder? And do you have any advice you would like to share with other fellow founders?
Well, in my case, something that I realized that it's a superpower, it's to start a company that's mission driven, and you connect with this purpose. Like starting a startup from your ikigai, I think that it's something that I realized that it gave me much more resilience than other entrepreneurs that I met in order to make Hura something that could have more and more impact. So I think that it's a great point that I didn't anticipate it when I started.
Ikigai. Anyone else?
I think one of the things we learned, there's so much, like Ram, we're not seasoned entrepreneurs at No Evil Foods. This is our first time kind of doing this. So there's a lot of learning by doing, learning by failing. I think one of the things that when you're a new company, there's so much excitement. You've got your first account, you're super stoked to see your product on the shelf. Just recognizing that that's only step one. That's only the beginning. That's like the bottom of the hill. You feel like you're like, yes, I'm at the top. Like I'm on shelf, I'm at retail. I'm doing it. But you're still kind of at the bottom of the hill. Like the real work really begins at that point when you've got retailer acceptance, when you're getting to have consumer adoption. But then how do you support your brand after that to make sure that you're continuing to climb that hill? That's how you get to the top. And I think that is one of the things we had so much early excitement for our brand, and that's one of the things that kicked us off to get where we are going. But to get to the next plateau, we have to really put our strategy into making sure that consumers understand who we are at every checkpoint, so that we're not just another brand on the shelf. So if we built in all this mission and all this purpose into what we do, how do we make sure that we're super effective, that when consumers see us in the store, they know that when they're buying No Evil, they're getting these other value adds besides just a great product, and making sure that that story is fully integrated into all of our touch points. And then, making sure that you have the sales and marketing and other team and foundational support established to also carry that story out at every touch point as well. So that, once you're on shelf, you succeed and hold that spot.
Yeah, I totally agree, and we're a long ways from that, so we'll call and have a chat about that when it's our problem to deal with too.
Anytime.
But I think for me, one of the things that I've really clearly learned is there are many times, especially as female founders or disadvantaged founders or founders of color, that you feel this kind of chip on your shoulder. At least for me, I felt a bit of a chip on my shoulder of like, am I doing this right? Or like, that's a weird comment. Would they have said that to me if I were a male founder? Or there's just lots of moments of both self-doubt and external doubt that come up at many different times. And I think I took some of them too personally, or worried about them too much, or just wasted too much energy. There's so much to do. There's so many more important things to worry about. And I think sometimes, like, especially around fundraising, a lot of people have questions around like, how do you fundraise a something $1 million seed round? For us, it was $3.5 million. Like, where do you even begin? And back to the kind of trust your gut, like there's lots of red flags about who's going to be a good partner, who is actually assistive in trying to create a business and bring it to market. And there are many moments, I think, as founders, female or not, where you're just not sure if you're doing it right. And nobody knows how to do it, is the frank truth. Like, I mean, I went to an MBA program that's supposed to help you prepare to be able to run all kinds of businesses. And no one teaches you how to start a company. Whether it's your first or your 10th, it's always a new adventure. Everyone's kind of faking it till they make it a little bit. And I think, again, just like being not worrying about some of the small things quite so much, finding the big red flags, seeing who's like, wow, that's obviously not a good partner, or wow, that really is a great partner. And worrying a little less about like, do I know what I'm doing? And instead figuring out like, okay, what am I going to do next? I think is something that both learned through experience and see in founders around me now, only 18 months in, God help me. But see is that continually to be kind of a theme of like, am I doing this right? Or like, how do you do that? And the answer is there really is no playbook that just tells you how to do this. You kind of have to learn in public and figure it out as you go.
I think that's so good, Michelle. As innovators and
Exactly.
founders, we're innovating. We're doing something that's not been done before. So yeah, there's not going to be a rule book. Like you've got to figure it out. You've got to rebuild the system differently. You've got to be able to be comfortable being uncomfortable and being unsure and just, fumbling your way through it. I think that's a really good learning for people because there is so much self-doubt as, you're leading a team, you're the public face of the company, all of those things. So yeah, definitely something important to keep in mind.
Exactly. When we have like technological challenges, we tell in the team, like if it was that easy, then 1,000 other people would have already done it by now. So if no one is doing it, then it means like there is some challenge in it. And then that perseverance of, going forward and not getting let down by the challenges that you face is one of the biggest thing in a technological development company, I believe. And that's how we learn by doing, and also like growing in that sense, like making each milestones very important for the growth, and also like not being scared of the scale. I mean, people when we were building, they come and ask like, oh, but what are you going to do with the 10 tons? You need 100,000 tons, but 10 tons or 20 tons is a starting point, and then you can get to the next level. So that kind of a persistence growth, and also like not being scared of like the scale part is something that we always think it's very important for any business.
Brilliant, really brilliant. All your learnings. I have a lot of Q&As coming in. I think we should just get to them, and feel free to answer if you think you can elaborate. First one is: ingredients are more expensive, such as equipment to produce. Do you think in a plant-based business, is there space for small business to be competitive?
It's getting harder. It's definitely getting harder. We're an established company, but we're still very small in the grand scheme of things. And one of the things that we're noticing is that brands that are much better capitalized are pushing out smaller brands and have deeper pockets and deeper connections with retailers, with distributors. Right now, there's a lot of distribution issues with just getting food on trucks because of vaccines and other things. But if you're a larger brand who's moving more product, you will be prioritized over a smaller brand. So I think what we need to do as small brands is really refine our values propositions to make sure that we are not just a Me Too product, that there is something extra, there's something special, there's something different about what we are doing. I think for small brands, that often comes down to authenticity, because that's something that a large brand can't replicate. They can't manufacture that in a room. Consumers see through that right away, and you can't buy that. And so I think that's something that's important to keep in your pocket, is to be you, be real, because consumers want to see that. And I think that the other thing is collaboration, figuring out how you can join up with partners to be bigger than you are. So who are your team members? Who are your allies? Who, what other bigger companies are looking to lift you as they've already ascended? So who else can they bring up with you? And looking for those people and those opportunities and ways to make connections. I think that's one of the really wonderful things about the plant-based space, is that it really is about collaboration instead of competition. For most people that are involved in this. And so we are all genuinely looking to help each other out. And so I think, just looking for those opportunities to connect.
Just to call out, if you're looking for authentic Twitter, you should definitely follow at No Evil Foods, because they do some epic blowback on some stupid tweets. So if you're looking for
Michelle.
genuine authenticity, they're a brand to definitely emulate.
And sometimes as an entrepreneur, you see yourself really small in the big scheme of things. But some people say, and I'm super in line with this, like FoodTech is the new internet. When you look at the meat industry, it's 1.4 trillion industry. And in 2040, it's forecasted that 60% of proteins won't come from animals. So the whole supply has a lot of problems in order to keep feeding a world that will need more protein. So it's full of opportunities. So at the end, it's to find what you're passionate about, what are your skills, what you want to solve, because the whole supply is full of opportunities, not just from branding, but how proteins will be, how they will be produced, from where they will come, how the umami flavor from meat can come from plant-based meat process. So there is full of opportunity, and at the end, it's understanding well the problems to be part of the solution.
True, yeah, 100%. There's a lot of opportunity everywhere. I love it. Next questions. How do you navigate various certifications like vegan, organic, kosher, etc.?
I think certifications are important. I think that it's how one additional way that you build consumer trust. People want to understand what their food is. Those certifications are one approach to doing that. So that's something that we're focusing on right now. As our company grows, we just moved into our own manufacturing facility just a little over a year ago. And so now that we've got our processes a little more kind of stable, we're working to collect certifications and really carry forward that trust to our consumers and that transparency as well, because I think that is really what people want to see. They want to have a better understanding and a clearer picture into how their food is made and what it's made from.
Perfect. And I have also, is it important for ethical brands to also have ESG credentials?
Yes. For the love of God, yes. I get so tired of people impact washing things saying, oh, I'm a social entrepreneur, but then they're not actually tracking anything. They don't have any metrics that they're looking ahead to. They're not building in the thought of packaging or supply chain. They're just thinking about production. I think this is one of the bigger issues of our time now, is every company can talk about things as if they're doing something that's impactful, and it's not. And as someone who went to an MBA program where many of my peers are the evil empire on the other side, I can tell you, like, there's a lot of people who care about this, but they're not actually putting direct metrics behind it in a way that makes it meaningful. And, it's one thing to say like, oh, we're moving to stakeholder capitalism instead of shareholder. But if you're not actually putting numbers behind it, or action, or dollars, or incremental change, you need to get out of the way of the people who are going to. So I take great issue with companies who think that they are an ethical or sustainable or impactful brand, not actually starting to utilize E Corp certifications or GIN and GAP measurements, or some of these impact tools that are out there that really do help you track the impact you have, just like the revenue that you're creating.
And also, I totally agree with what has been said, but it's important that all the companies that want to reinvent something have to be innovative. And in order to be innovative, you have to have a clear purpose of what you want to solve. So for example, in Hura, we put our metrics of impact first, because we try to always say, okay, don't identify yourself with what you do, but what you want to achieve. And what we have to achieve is how to make this impact even deeper. And I think that at the end, having metrics of your impact also helps you to be more and more innovative, because you are thinking more from a long-term perspective and the roots of the problems that you want to solve.
Absolutely. And I have a question for Cedra. You do not use additives and only choose the highest quality ingredients, so no compromise on this. Do you still manage to be competitive in terms of price and profitability, staying at the same time affordable for your customers? Also, do you think consumers do perceive the additional attention and effort you put in your products?
Very good questions. It is a work in progress. I think that yes, we are holding our own in terms of price competitiveness. When you look at price per pound of our product compared to products in our competitive set, we are comparable. How that translates to stores and retailers is that our cart values are higher because we are a little more of the higher end kind of premium. And so, in terms of the value that we provide to the retailer, we are a little more valuable than your base brand because there's more kind of bang for your buck when someone purchases No Evil products. I think that comes with scale. And again, comes with partnerships. And it's something that you have to set a goal to do and then figure out the path to get there. Right now, we are fundraising, and that's one of the things that we're looking at with the investors relationships that we bring on in this next round is how can we maximize value for our supply chain so that we can bring those costs down, because then we will translate it to the consumer, because that we really believe that to have impact, we need to be accessible. There are some things that we've been doing as a sort of intermediary step. One of them is working with Plantega, which is a small but growing kind of pilot project in the New York City area to create plant-based cases, refrigerated cases in New York City bodegas, which is where New York City locals shop. And it's also where there's a lot of food accessibility issues and unhealthy choices that are typically available. And so working to offer our products in those situations at cost to increase access and use that to subsidize each other. And so we're looking at different models for how we can become kind of more accessible and more cost competitive. The last part of the question, do consumers get it? To be honest, I don't think they do yet. And that's on us to fully communicate as a company. And that's really what our focus is on this year is what we were talking about earlier, to make sure that when they see our box on the shelf, they get it. And so how do we, just really drive it home that this is a different company, that it's not just a product that you're buying, but you're buying into our mission as well. So that's a heavy lift for us to take on, but we're up for it.
Yeah, perfect. And more consumers get it, I think. There's more awareness every day. I have a total other question. It's from Michelle on YouTube, where we are also being broadcasted. Are there ethical issues in using human cells to produce milk?
Yeah, everyone always wants to talk about bioethics. I'm thinking about getting a bioethicist on my team so I can be like, and you can talk to them. But yeah, I mean, the question of human cells. So we're using tissue that we've been granted the rights to use. So people that we know exactly what we're doing with the cells and that they are going to be used in commercial applications. So it's not if you've heard the story of Henrietta Lacks, which is of course a kind of a cautionary tale of when science goes awry, our cells look nothing like that. They're being sourced from people who know exactly what we're doing with them and have given us permission and rights to be able to do that. But I think the broader question of should we be using human cells to produce things is where people have some this feels like a sci-fi movie that could go awry. And my response is we already use human cells to produce a lot of things. So when you look at different productions of biologics and drugs, we're sometimes using stem cells or cells directly from a patient. We're using other mammalian cells. So Chinese hamster ovary cells, CHO cells as they're known, produce a majority of the drugs that you're probably, when you're in dire straits, are looking or responding to. And so it's kind of the natural progression, I would say, of biotechnology more broadly, that the human body or mammalian bodies are incredibly biosynthetically prolific, and millennia of evolution have created the animals and the humans around us to respond to the environment that we do. And so these cells are incredibly robust. And it feels a little short-sighted to think about utilizing plants or utilizing the kingdom of fungi or all of these other amazing precision technologies that enable such great change and stop short the moment we think about mammalian cells. So I hear their concerns. I agree. It's a little weird. As a food scientist working with dairy, it was a little strange to be like, and now we make human milk. But the benefits far outweigh the costs, in our opinion, at Biomilk. And we do everything to the utmost of our ethics and belief system, knowing that we want everyone to feel safe and comfortable with this end product.
I think there's something really important in what you said, Michelle, if I can jump in for a second, that people think it's weird to make human milk. But I think that that's really the mindset shift at that there's such acceptance and normalcy associated with drinking the milk of other mammals, but drinking the milk of the milk that we are meant and born to drink is still weird. It's still a weird concept to so many people, and it shouldn't be. The science part of it, I can understand people's reservations there, but just the concept of why we would create milk from the mammal that we are meant to drink milk from, that shouldn't be a weird thing. So kudos to you for continuing to push that and create normalcy around it.
Thanks. I also like to point out, like, we drink bovine milk. Like, we domesticated giant animals to trust us so that we could milk them, which is like a little weird in of itself and a little
That's
like mind trippy. And as we think about other mammalian milk species, our technology can work for all mammals. Like, you've never been able to milk a blue whale before. That might be something of the future that we could talk about producing. And I think, like, when, it sounds a little sci-fi, it sounds a little scary, but when you look at the way technology has changed our lives around us, it kind of feels natural in a lot of ways in comparison to some of the animal husbandry and methods we've used of the past.
Perfect, thank you. This is to all speakers. If your intention is to move away from meat protein, or is it an alternative to meat? I wonder if this could take shape in the global south, somebody asks.
Can you repeat the last part of the question, please, Michiel?
The last part is if this would take shape in the global south of the Earth.
Well,
So
at the end,
more or less, is it a move away from the protein, or is it actually an alternative? Do you want to replace it?
At the end, I think that, well, the Hura perspective is clear, is the successor part, but when we look at data, the conversion rate using animals from legumes and cereals to meat, it's super low. In beef, can be from 1 to 5%, and chicken will be 20%, looking at animals as machines. But plant-based proteins can be like 300 rate to 700. So it's amazing that with the same amount of cereals and legumes, we can choose to feed all Europe with beef burgers, or 7 times the whole population of Earth eating at a European pace of eating. So I think that the superiority in efficiency that plant-based and other technologies bring into the table are showing us that it's a successor in our way, in a way of how to feed a world without destroying the planet and taking care of the animals in the way.
I probably held an unpopular opinion, so I always like to share this because stirring the pot is part of my jam, which is I don't think we're ever going to replace animal agriculture at 100% on this planet. There are heritage reasons why certain cultures raise animals and live side by side with them. I'm a big fan of Alpenmilk Swiss cheese, and I'm a milk maker, and I'm about to tell you that, like, I'm not replacing that. I still want the Swiss to make delicious darn cheese for special occasions or for cultural reasons. And I just don't see in our growing planet how animal husbandry will be entirely eliminated. That being said, we're not able to actually feed planet in the protein sources that we need at the pace of increase of humanity that we see. And we need more better alternates to relieve pressure on the system. So I like to think about, there are many reports that say like 2025, 2030, animal agriculture will disappear from the planet. I don't think that's true, but I would like to see it be a small minority in comparison to the protein consumption we're seeing from other sources that are more sustainable, that are more nutritional, and are in some many ways better quality. And that's where I get pretty excited to think about, what is kind of the evolution of these different technologies that all lace together to be a better set of alternates for people than we have today, and give them consumer choice to make active decisions about what they actually like and want to eat, rather than running out or running against our planetary boundaries in terms of how we're going to feed people.
Well, I think that a great evidence of that is when you ask yourself 300 years ago about what's the best vehicle, people were saying a horse. So right now, using horses is an exception when you look at the vehicle industry. And I think that if the tech develops at the pace that it's happening, it can also happen in food, where using animals will be an exception and something that will bring your attention. because at the end, if we are having the best result in a best way, why not do it?
Horse bacon, yum.
Yeah, exactly. It's probably more of that generation thinking, like, the new generation people are maybe born vegetarian and vegan. So that could also be like when they are coming up and the next generation's coming up, then the traditional things that you said probably will not be there. I mean, they probably will not be seeing a tradition.
Yeah.
Great discussion. I have one more question before we end. In emerging economies, consumers want to consume animal meat to affirm their social status. Opposite trends to advanced economies with alternative solutions. Is this a cultural, a marketing, sustainability issue, or all of the above?
Well, at the end, the inertia that we are having socially with what meat represents and using meat, it's obvious. So at the end, we have to double down our efforts. And I think that the industry is doing in terms of product development, supply chain, and how to create a better and better product, but also how to reach it to the consumers in an engaging way. So at the beginning, this industry, it's also emerging, super exciting, but we are in the beginnings of something that for sure will be transformative.
I agree with Mark. I'll add to that I think it's an education issue, in that we need to start much younger with our children in schools, teaching them about sustainability, that it's a government issue, that we need to have better policies and protections made from our government, that it's a policy issue, that dairy industries and cattle industries are being funded and subsidized. I think that when more people understand the true cost of their choices, that won't be seen as status. That will be looked down upon. And I think that is, and we're not in the business at No Evil Foods and scolding or looking down on people, but I think we need to capitalize on the momentum that Mark just indicated, that there is something brewing here that is positive and it is transformative and it is going to be what the future is built from. And we need to make it something that people want to be a part of. We have to make it sexy. We have to make people think like, I want to be part of that. I want to be in that movement, because the alternative just doesn't make any sense to me anymore. And so there's a lot of education to do around that, but we can do it.
At the end, I think that we have the challenge to bring the same debate that it's happening and has a lot of attention in energy about a transition to more sustainable sources. And also it's happening in transportation. We have to bring it to protein. And that's what I love this term about a protein transition, something that everyone can be part of and lead, that will bring us to a better future.
Thank you so much. I really want to thank you all for all the impact you make. It's amazing, all the insights you gave tonight. Thank you so much. Also want to thank the Forward Fooding team for organizing this. And I think I hope to see a lot of you in the future. And I am going to give the podium back to Alessio now.
Thank you very much, Michiel, and thank you very much all for actually taking the time to speak with us today for this webinar. We had an overwhelming amount of questions through the chat. It's not always easy to actually run these events, logistically speaking, sending questions here and there. And unfortunately, we couldn't take them all, but I'm hoping that at least the one that we covered and all the talks that we've done was actually of inspiration. I had received some really good feedbacks already, and some that actually gave me goosebumps, I have to be honest with you, from actually people that represent the new generation, which is also one of the reasons why we make these events available. But again, without further ado, let me thank all the speakers. I know you guys are really busy building your businesses, and we really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us. Just to wrap things up, I'm gonna reshare my screen quickly to just well, tell you about our next webinars. On the 31st of March, we will be running our webinar about vertical farming heroes. So some of the companies that have ranked in our FoodTech 500 this year. And then we will be doing our last one of this series on the 21st of April, which will be all about food waste, which is another very big topic in this space. Again, thanks a lot for joining in and taking the time. And we will make also this webinar available on YouTube. So for anyone who wasn't able to actually join us today, can be rewatched over YouTube. And thanks, Mikhail, for being a great moderator. And we'll see you shortly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.